Hey, what's going on, guys? So today we have a new Lies of P update. Patch 1.3 has actually arrived, and with it actually came a bunch new changes. Now, once again, there's just going to be a bunch of just really vague stuff in here that might take a little bit more deeper diving. I'm just going to give my initial thoughts and just explain some of the basic stuff, and I'll probably make a later video just talking about just the more in-depth and more vague things that they tend to not describe to us. But first things first, soundtrack. There's a soundtrack now. You can buy that if you want to. And also they have been nominated for 2 different categories in Game of the Year, Best Art Direction and Best RPG. So you can actually go vote for them there because it's a pretty solid game. I recommend it. But getting into the changes, new features and content. So basically there's some of the cosmetic stuff. We have the Alidoro set, and we do get a cool new hat and some glasses. And speaking of which, we actually can now separately equip glasses and helmets as part of the hair section in the cosmetic menu. Now, speaking of hair, short gray hair is actually now in the game. You just go to the Geppetto's tool section and you can just equip the short gray hair there. But to unlock this, you actually do have to beat the game. Doesn't matter what ending you get, but you do have to at least beat it. And there actually is changes to the subtitles. You actually can increase the size of them now for the people that have problems seeing. Now, moving on to balance and content improvements. Decreased field difficulty. Adjusted the attack speed of some monsters to make their attacks more intuitive. That don't really explain which types of monsters, but one that I feel like they did actually end up changing was the Shovel Fire Dude. This guy is like slamming attacks. I feel like they just come out a lot slower now. You can just dodge them a lot easier, so you don't really get stun locked as much. But I haven't fought like every other monster to try and figure out what exactly is going on in these changes here. Increase the duration of stance break for some monsters. Once again, they don't really specify, but the fact that stance breaks are just going to be easier to get now is always nice. Adjusted the spawn locations of some monsters and traps to fit better with the flow of the game. Now, I've gone through like a couple of areas to try and figure out what's going on. Now, I'm not going to lie, I haven't played the game in a long time, so I kind of forget what some of the locations are actually like. It doesn't really feel that different. I never really had much of a problem in terms of the spawn locations of some of the enemies, but the fact that they're trying to change things around is actually pretty cool. But this is probably just the biggest and best change of the entire patch. Rising Dodge is actually now a default ability in the game. It is no longer tied to the P organ. If you don't know what Rising Dodge is, it's basically the ability to dodge roll when you're actually like on the ground. Being able to cancel that animation is just really nice, and it should always have been a default skill. Now, this actually has been replaced with the perk Retain Guard Regain upon Pulse Cell use. Now, normally when you actually have a little bit of Guard Regain and use a Pulse Cell, it just basically consumes it. It just gets rid of it completely. But now it just keeps it there. So basically you just have the ability to just get a bunch more health back, which basically just incentivizes us blocking and trying to actually get a deflect even more. And inherently just making the game a little bit easier and less frustrating. But if you're a person that just like deflects every single time, then this doesn't really affect you. But if you're a beginner, I definitely recommend going with this ability right here. Combat balancing adjustments. Increase the damage of some weapons. Yep, I have no idea what weapons. I gotta do a deeper dive and probably test out a whole bunch of things and look at some older gameplay and try and figure out exactly what's going on. Increase some weapons to trigger stance breaks to monsters more frequently. Also, same thing, it's very vague, but the fact that some weapons are just now buffed is always going to be really good. Now, relatively lighter blades will gain more guard regain, while heavier blades gain less guard regain. Now, this is actually a pretty big change because at the moment, the meta is just using a quick handle and pair it alongside a heavier blade, and I feel like they do want to change that, and these next 2 changes definitely do prove this. Decrease the delay after an attack and the time to charge a charge attack for some of the heavy handles, and now some heavier handles will have a faster attack speed depending on the assembled blade. So now having some like heavier handles paired alongside some quicker types of blades will end up resulting in a much faster charge heavy attack. So going with this type of playstyle and this type of build actually results in this more guard regain, faster heavy attacks, and being that you have a heavier handle, you probably end up staggering a lot quicker as well. So I definitely want to do a deeper dive into these styles of combos and try and figure out which type of lighter blade with heavier handle combo is actually going to be the best, because not gonna lie, the fact that we only have like one type of meta with like the quick handle and heavy blade does make the game pretty stale in terms of its variety. So this is definitely a much needed change. Adjusted the destruction damage inflicted to monsters by a perfect guard. Now, once again, they don't really specify by how much, but the fact that you're just going to get more destruction damage by perfect guarding is always going to be nice. It just makes the risk of the perfect guard just match up with the reward a lot more now. The weapons Puppet Saber Blade will not have increased stats after enhancing. They don't really specify by how much, but the fact that at higher levels the Saber Blade is going to be better, and that is a quicker blade, so actually might be nice to pair along certain types of builds now. Increase the movement distance while using the Proof of Humanity weapons attack skill. Now, honestly, I haven't really noticed much of a difference. I don't really think that the speed is actually increased at all, but I think you just get a little bit more of a lunge. I have to like compare it to like older type of gameplay. I might have some on screen right now, but the fact that if it does go further, it is really nice. Increase the damage reduction rate while guarding with the weapon etiquette, but reduce the Fable charge amounts for a set period of time when attacking. I have no idea why this change really came to pass. Now, the guard reduction rate when guarding has been increased from 38 to 41, which is barely anything and not noticeable at all. But they decided to reduce the guard amount that you actually get when you use the Fable Arts. And do you know how you use the Fable Art? You get a bit of blocking frames. That's just less of an effect now. I don't really know why that's a thing. It was pretty hard to pull off to begin with and really benefits. I don't really know where it had to get changed. Enhanced the attack tracking mechanism after successfully performing the Fable Arts guard parry. Guard parry is already one of the best weapon skills in the entire game, so the fact that you just get better hit detection now is always going to be really good. Increase the damage buff of the Bell of Propagation to the player. Now this is the skill on the clock sword handle, and when you actually do use it for one Fable charge. Now what this actually does do is increase the damage that the player deals and actually does increase the damage of surrounding enemies. So it's obviously going to be a lot more of a risky type of handle to use, but if you're pretty confident in your abilities, this was always a pretty decent pick. But in terms of the changes, from before the patch, I think it was around about like a 15% damage increase, but now after the patch, it's actually closer towards 30%. And it actually only changes the damage that the player does do. The damage that the enemies actually do is exactly the same now. So actually a lot more incentive to actually use this handle, and combined with the fact that it actually does get a pretty good moveset and a very quick heavy attack, it actually might be one of the better options. Now, unfortunately, the buff does only last about like 10 to 15 seconds, but the fact that it does only consume one charge, it might be a pretty decent option. The attribute status ailments will now stack faster with the following Fable Arts: Thunderstrike, Flaming Strike, and Acid Slash. So these three skills are the elemental-based skills that you get off the larger types of blades that do a pretty nice damaging attack and do buff the weapon additionally as well. Now these actually probably did need a buff because very rarely would you actually end up proccing a status effect with these things, because Grindstones just did it a lot better because they tend to have better status build up and they just lasted a lot longer. Grindstones tend to last about 40 seconds, where these things only last about 15 seconds. So I wish they actually did increase the duration as well, but just having more status effect build up is always going to be pretty good. Increase the damage of fatal attacks to better scale with the player's stats. Now, I don't really know what they mean by this. Are they going to have fatal attacks directly scaling off a stat in particular, or is it just going to be scaled by AR? I don't really know, but the definitive thing is that when you have higher levels, you're just going to be end up doing more damage with your fatal attacks, which I guess is always going to be really nice. But I definitely have to break this one down to try and figure out exactly what's going on here. Increase the attack radius and tracking mechanism of the Legion Arm Aegis 3 countercharge. Now, when fully upgraded and actually getting the block with the Aegis, it actually does that little AoE attack, and you can do an additional follow-up attack after you tap it again, and actually can do a little nice AoE attack. Now, this has actually just been improved to just have a larger radius and actually has inherently better tracking now. Now, I've never really tried to like redirect my attack when using this, but the fact that I can now a lot better is actually going to be really good. But the fact that it does have an AoE that I can hit multiple enemies at once, make it better for crowd control, makes this Legion Arm just even better. But as you'll see later down on the list, it has got a nerfed as well. But as for the last change for the combat balancing adjustments, the pillars in the King's Flame Foco room will only be destroyed by his Fury attacks, which I guess is cool. Now, there also has been some new items added to the Polendina's shop. You just get a bunch more quartz now in the game. You get 2 more right at the beginning of the game, and you actually do get an additional one when you actually expand the shop for the first time. And if you expand the shop 3 times, you actually get 2 more full moonstones of the Covenants to be purchased. So just having more quartz and having more full moonstones is just always going to be nice. The game already does give you a nice amount of the upgrade materials to upgrade a bunch of weapons at once, so just having more is just always going to be really good. But getting into the bug fixes, I'm not going to read every single one. You guys can just read it up or just zoom it on screen. But the one that I actually do want to cover is fixed a bug while continuously pressing the guard button during the guard stance Legion Arm Aegis that will trigger a perfect guard every single time. So the way this used to work is that you just hold onto the Legion Arm, it will just block, and you just keep spamming the L1 button or the block button, and it'll just deflect every single time. Now that no longer happens, you actually do have to time your deflects now. So that's definitely an unfortunate change for a lot of people. I know a lot of people relied on this against Luxasia for her types of Fury attacks. So unfortunately, you guys are just going to have to memorize the attacks from now on. One other bug fix I do want to talk about, not really the bug fix itself, but like the fact that Moonphase pocket watches don't really work in boss fights. I feel like they should. Like, come on now. It's such a small little change that sometimes I just want to be able to use it during a boss fight. I don't know. It's like a weird thing to complain about, but I would just like for it to be a thing. Anyway, that pretty much concludes it for the entirety of the patch. It actually is a pretty decent one. Some really nice changes. A lot of people will probably end up being upset that they didn't really change up the frames that the dodge or the deflect ends up getting. But like, come on, it's just never going to happen. The game is still very doable, even without just having increased iframes or just more deflect frames. And the whole game is balanced around that as well. So I don't really see them changing it up now. It'll probably be something that you will see changed in the sequel and not in this game at all. Anyway, please do like and subscribe because I do have some more videos coming along the way, whether it be Lies of P or any other FromSoft Souls game related. And do follow me on Twitch as well because I actually am live there every single day. Anyway, see you guys in the next one. Bye.